Things just keep getting worse for Stellantis. Inventory is piling up, and in today's video, we're talking about the numbers along with special deals that can be had on Stellantis products for the month of September. So let's get right into it. Okay, so this impromptu video was really spurred by Cox Automotive's latest report. So if you guys know me, I've referenced Cox Automotive plenty of times in the past. They have a lot of different brands. Kelley Blue Book is under their umbrella, but they also run a lot of the software the dealerships use to sell their inventory. So they're a very reliable source to get a good idea of the automotive industry. And every month they release a report that shows the days of supply of vehicles under each specific brand. Now, they don't include all of the brands, but the majority of the brands sold here in the United States are included in this bar chart that they just break down. Very easy to understand, and I'll actually link it down in the description below because the report also has some other very good information to know. For one, it talks about the average pricing for the month that they're reporting on. They also talk about the incentives that dealerships or manufacturers are running for specific cars. And if you track all this information over time, you can kind of see, how are the trends going? And honestly, they're actually going pretty good. Pricing is starting to stabilize and in some aspects starting to come down a little bit. And you're definitely seeing incentives from the manufacturers going up month after month. Now, pricing is nowhere near where it was before the pandemic. It's still absurdly high, but average price for a new car is somewhere around $47,000 or so, which is a little bit better than it was last month. So the numbers that were released as of today were actually for the month of August. And time again, Stellantis's brands, which include Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler, Ram, Alfa Romeo, Fiat, those are all always on the highest end in terms of days of supply of inventory. And essentially what they do is they just track the number of sales that a particular vehicle brand has and the amount of that inventory sitting on dealership lots, and they can calculate the days of supply of a particular brand. And Stellantis is always kind of in the worst segment. I actually brought this topic up about a year ago in regards to Dodge products being on the highest end of the list in terms of supply, and the story really hasn't changed much over a year. Now, I've looked at this report month after month, and there's a couple changes from the July report to the August report, and that is the fact that pretty much every single brand under Stellantis's umbrella has done worse in August than it did in July. Really, the only brand that did better was Jeep. The days of supply actually went down a little bit, which is a good thing, but it only went down by like 7 days or so, so it really wasn't a significant difference. Every other brand did worse, and I have the numbers right here. Now, the national average also went up month over month, so in August, it was 77 days of average days of supply amongst all of the manufacturers. And time and time again, Stellantis is definitely on the higher end. So in the best category is Chrysler, and that was 107 days of supply. Then you've got Jeep at 122. Then you've got Dodge at 149 days of supply, followed by the next category, which is more than double the national average. So we're talking more than 154 days of supply. And the brands under that category are Lincoln, which is kind of no surprise. They don't sell very well. Alfa Romeo, which is a lot worse than what it did in the previous month. Ram, Jaguar, and Mini. So those are the brands that are over 154 days of supply on dealership lots. Things aren't looking good. Another thing I want to point out is Car Edge, which is also another helpful resource. They have a lot of research on the automotive industry. They're able to compile a list of the specific models that are sitting on dealership lots the most. And I'm actually going to link them down in the description below as well so you guys can check them out. But according to Car Edge, as of the month of September, the model with the highest amount of days of supply at 617 is the Alfa Romeo Giulia. That is a lot of supply, and it's, again, a Stellantis brand that's not doing well, followed by Mini, then Alfa Romeo again, then you've got Fiat. I think you're starting to see a trend here, and then it keeps going down. There's a Mercedes on the list, an Audi, 2 Jeeps, and the Dodge Hornet. Now, the Hornet was actually in #1 spot in the previous month, so it's just not doing very well. And that leads me to my next point in regards to the deals that can be had because there's so much supply of inventory of some of these vehicles. Now, as a side note, I've always talked about how September is a fantastic time to buy a new car. Now, obviously, if you want to save the most amount of money, you should probably go buy a gently used car, or, maybe try to fix your car up as long as possible. But if you absolutely have to have a new car, September is a great time to buy for a couple reasons. First of all, it is quarter end. And quarter end is always an important time for any business because that's kind of where you post your numbers, you take a look at what the trajectory looks like, and it's a very important time for especially public companies to kind of show to their investors where's the company at and how is it going to do by the end of the year. And so September is a good indicator for year-end trajectory as well. Also, month-end is also just a great time because you're trying to meet certain sales figures by the end of the month. But the other reason I think that September is a fantastic time is because it's also the time period where you're starting to see next year's inventory starting to come online. So you're right now seeing 2025 inventory coming in. At the same time, it's competing with 2024 inventory. And so if you're not super picky about what model year you're getting, you can get that 2024 inventory for even more discounted prices because most people are probably going to show up at the dealership lot and want to buy the newest model. They're not necessarily going to want to buy last year's model. And so it's a great time to take advantage of those types of incentives, which is not something you always find in other quarters, especially in March and June. Now, if you're curious about specific negotiating tactics when you get to a dealership, I actually made a video a couple of years ago that I think is pretty good and dives into some of the things that you can use to negotiate for a better deal. I'm going to link it up on the screen right now so you guys can check it out after watching this video. So that brings me to the second part of this video, which is what deals can be had on some of these models. Obviously, if you're going to have high supply and low demand, you're going to start seeing discounts. Now, dealerships definitely want to sell cars, and sometimes you'll see them selling vehicles at a loss because they get certain rebates or incentives back from the manufacturer for hitting certain quotas. So if you walk into a dealership the very last day of September, very last day of any quarter really, you're probably going to get the most amount of deals. Now, inventory might be limited on what you can find, but if you're picking one of the vehicles on today's list, then there's going to be plenty of inventory to choose from. And dealerships don't want to hold these cars continuously month after month because they're paying interest on flooring lines that they use to purchase the vehicles from the manufacturer. They're actually buying them from the OEMs and then selling them to you, and they use lines of credit to make these transactions happen. And every day that goes by that they're not selling this car, they're paying interest and they're not making any money from the manufacturer from the rebates. And so they're definitely incentivized to sell these vehicles, and that is why the next part of this video, we're talking about some of the great deals that can be had on some of these high supply vehicles that if you're not super picky, you may get a good deal on these in the month of September or possibly even in October, November, and December. Now again, there's a reason these vehicles are not selling that well. They're just not very popular. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad cars. There's a variety of reasons why people might not buy these cars. One is maybe they're not aware of these vehicles. Two, maybe they're too high priced right now. Or three, there's just a lot of competition. So it doesn't mean these vehicles are bad. But the first one on my list, and I gotta say this is probably the best one, is of course the Dodge Hornet, the vehicle that had the most amount of days of supply last month. Now the Hornet is kind of a mixed bag for me. So I've driven the Alfa Romeo Tonale, which is essentially a clone of the Dodge Hornet. Or I should say the Hornet is a clone of the Tonale. And the Tonale is a fantastic vehicle. It really felt very quick, very performance-oriented. The handling was great. There were some cheap materials for sure in the second row especially, and it's definitely a subcompact crossover, so it's not, a luxurious car, but it was a fun car to drive. And I gotta say, if the Hornet drives anything like the Tonale, which I imagine it does, especially if you choose the RT, it's a fun car to drive. I think it's underrated. A lot of people talk crap on it, but I think the reason they do that is because the pricing for the Hornet, it's not cheap. I mean, it's definitely more expensive than a RAV4 or an HRV or anything like that. Now, Dodge claims it has the most amount of horsepower in its segment, and I believe that, but that's not necessarily the buyer base for this type of vehicle, right? You're looking at people who are maybe fresh out of college or just want to get an affordable car. They're not necessarily looking for horsepower. But since they're not selling very well, the incentives for this vehicle are very, very good. So right now, you can get a Dodge Hornet with dealer discounts somewhere in the mid to high $30,000 range for the RT and maybe mid to low $30,000 range for the GT. That's a pretty decent price for a brand new car that comes with pretty good tech. I think it has like a 10-inch touchscreen. You've got instrument gauge cluster display that's all digital. You've got kind of a sporty driving position. Mid-30s isn't bad. Also, to sweeten the deal, Dodge is offering 2.9% APR for 84 months on the Hornet. That's a 7-year loan at 2.9%. That's really impossible to find nowadays. Even though interest rates were just cut yesterday, rates are still really high for auto loans. I think they're averaging around 9%. So 2.9%, obviously, if you qualify, is a fantastic deal. It just goes to show that Dodge really needs to move this inventory. And then if you choose to lease instead, they're offering up to $9,500 in lease discounts. Now, I don't have the exact lease numbers or lease offers, but that's a whole heck of a lot of money to get on a discount of $9,500. Now, I think part of that has to do with the $7,500 tax credit because the RT is a hybrid powertrain, but regardless, $9,500 off definitely helps in terms of lease payments. So fantastic deal. If you can find one in the low to mid $30,000 range at a 2.9% APR, I think you're going to have a great time with it. Now, reliability is definitely questionable, but if you buy brand new, you're going to get that 3-year, 36,000 mile warranty. So it's really not that big of a heartburn. After those 3 years, then either you sell it or if you're leasing, you just give it back. Now, the next vehicle on my list is no surprise. It's from Ram because Ram has over double the amount of days of supply of the national average. Now, the 2024 Ram 1500 is, in my opinion, going to be heavily discounted at dealership lots. The reason I say that is because the 2025 model year, which had a pretty okay refresh. It wasn't really much of a facelift, aside from the fact that they changed some of the powertrain options and changed some of the technology. The 2024 model year is going to be heavily discounted to move that inventory off the lot while the 2025 inventory comes onto the dealership lots. Now, 2024 inventory is a little bit hard to come by. I did a search in my local area and only I think one dealership had some remaining 2024 inventory. So September is probably the best time to take advantage of that deal because I doubt October, November, December are going to have these types of deals. However, a 2024 Bighorn Crew Cab 1500, which is about a $55,000 truck, is leasing right now for $469 a month plus tax if you have it, with $3,700 down. That's a fantastic deal, honestly. If you're looking for a full-size pickup truck, $469 a month plus tax is great. I mean, usually a good lease deal is about 1% of the MSRP of the vehicle after you put about 10% down. That's been my experience. And this is less than 10% down and you're getting less than 1% per month as your monthly payment. So if you're looking at leasing, that's a fantastic option. The other option is if you do APR financing, it's 5.9% for 72 months. So definitely not as good as the Hornet, but 5.9%, if you qualify, is still much better than the national average interest rate for new vehicles out there. So still a really good deal, 6 years, 5.9%. That's really not that bad. And if you find that 2024 model year, it's going to be great. In fact, some of you may prefer the 2024 model year because as of 2025, they got rid of the Hemi V8 engine. So if you can find a 2024 with that Hemi V8, more power to you because you may be getting an even better vehicle. Now, the next vehicle on my list, no surprise, is the vehicle that hit the most amount of inventory days of supply that I mentioned earlier in this video, and that is the Alfa Romeo Giulia. Now, this is kind of an interesting one where the incentives on their website really aren't that great. However, I have a very strong feeling that if you show up at an Alfa Romeo dealership, you're going to be able to get insane discounts on the Giulia. The fact that they're sitting on over 600 days of supply, they're going to be itching to sell you a Giulia. So the national offer right now is just around $500 per month with about 10% down. It's really not that great, especially when you consider the MSRP of these vehicles. But again, if you show up at a dealership and you have cash, or if you got financing somewhere else, or if you're able to arrange financing with them, they're going to get you some discounts. And that's without question. Otherwise, the brand is not going to continue to exist. I mean, they need to sell vehicles. And if they're sitting on a Giulia for over 600 days, they're going to want to make a deal with you. Now, this next vehicle is also going to be a good deal if you're interested, and that's the Jeep Wagoneer and the Jeep Grand Cherokee. So both of those can be had for 0% APR, but it's for 36 months. Now, I realize not everybody's going to want to take a 0% loan for 36 months, but if you have that cash laying around to buy a Grand Cherokee outright, you might as well do the 0% for 36 months and then put that cash into the stock market or whatever other investments you want, because you're really not losing any money by doing this 36-month loan. So it's a great offer for those that have the money. If you don't, also a pretty decent deal, 5.9% for 72 months. So again, very similar to the Ram, they're starting to incentivize these vehicles to move them off the dealership lots. So those are 4 or 5 vehicles, depending on how you look at it, that are having some really good deals. And again, this is just national offers. If you show up at a dealership, that you know a vehicle has been sitting on the dealer lot for a long period of time, I guarantee you're going to be able to get a really good deal. Oftentimes a good resource to use is going on to Car Gurus. You can search your local inventory, of course, but I always look at the days that the vehicle has been on the market. It's on every single vehicle that you click on. At the very bottom of the page, it'll tell you how many days it's been listed. Now, obviously, if the car's been delisted and put back on, it's going to play with those numbers, but if you pay attention to that, you can kind of get a good idea of how long this vehicle has been sitting on the dealership lot, which means you're more than likely going to be able to get a better deal if a vehicle is sitting on the dealership lot for 60 plus days versus a vehicle that's been sitting for like 15 days. And again, end of September is a fantastic time. Trust me, it's worked for me multiple times, and I guarantee you a dealership is going to be wanting to make a deal with you on the very last day of September, more so than the very first day of October. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this little impromptu video talking about some of the numbers that Cox Automotive released today. I thought they were some interesting numbers I wanted to share with my audience. But if you guys did enjoy this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly videos. Also check me out on all the social media at @Schwazy_. Until next time, everybody, I hope you stay Schwazy, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.